Hey everyone, it's Types, and today I'm going to be ranking the top 10 best decks in the format right now. Keep in mind it is very early, so this list might not be the most precise. This is based on, obviously, my opinions and tournament results, so go check out the Limitless website or the Play Limitless website to see lists like these. I went with pretty generic lists that I could just find on the website, but you can certainly feel free to tweak them to your own liking, and also I'd be really interested in hearing what you have to say, what you think the best decks are, and like if I made any mistakes you think on the rankings. First of all, in terms of honorable mentions, I didn't really include any that I felt were necessary. Ones I guess I'll mention, I didn't include, there's one Arceus deck in particular here, but Arceus decks in general are pretty alright. I just didn't want to include a general Arceus one. And then also Control. Control's very good, I think, but no one's really playing it, so I didn't include it on this list. But aside from that, the top 10 honestly was super easy to make. Not necessarily super easy to order, but super easy to figure out what it was. Because there are really only 10 decks, in my opinion. They're seeing substantial amounts of play right now. And they're honestly all pretty cool. Speaking of pretty cool, yeah. So the 10th deck is actually going to be Lugia V-Star. Not nowhere near as strong as it was before rotation, where it was in like the highest tier of decks, I'd say. But it's still pretty solid, making the top 10. I think it's bottom of the top 10. You'll see the other listing on the bottom. The issue with Lugia now, it was already somewhat inconsistent. Now it's even less consistent. The attackers are more vulnerable. You don't have Evoltable Amazing Rare, which is just so strong. You don't really have access to Radiant Charizard because you can't accelerate to it, which is unfortunate for Lugia. And then you don't have access to Raikou Amazing Rare, which is also very good. Certainly, you do have some other okay options, but really the best ones here are Single Strike. You could actually run Gengar VMAX, Umbreon VMAX, or Single Strike Urshifu VMAX as well, but generally people are running with Tyranitar V as like the main attacker, Stonjourner, which is just a different typing and is a single prizer. Then also there's an Evoltable from Fusion Strike, I think, which some people play. This particular list runs Drapion V. I personally think you could probably cut that because your main attacker's fight is Dark type, and it's there as a counter to Mew. And honestly, Mew isn't that strong right now. And then we see this particular list runs Regenerative Energy. I don't really need to get into the list too much, but generally you want the single strike energies, and you have access to Earn of Vitality, which is very strong. But yeah, nothing too crazy. We see that there are lots of colorless energies here, though, because you're losing Aurora energy and all the individual types of energies. So unfortunately, Lugia, or probably fortunately, Lugia is losing a lot of pieces. That made it just so oppressive in the last format. Same thing with Control. The top three decks, I'd say, last format would Control, Lugia, and Lost Zone. And Lost Zone loses a piece as well. But yeah, Lugia is like all right. I don't really think there's another way of running Lugia. You could run it with Single Strike if you want, or with Rapid Strike, I guess. But I don't know. This list is very solid. But it's not my choice. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this deck to you unless you really want to play Lugia. Next is actually Inteleon VMAX with Urshifu VMAX. So I don't know why this is seeing so much play, to be honest, but it is seeing a lot of play. So I'd actually be really interested in hearing why. I wonder if someone made a video on it. I looked around. There are some videos, but they're kind of old. But the idea here is you use Inteleon VMAX as just a solid attacker. And then you also have Urshifu VMAX. They're just good attackers. And then you also can like do lots of bench damage with Inteleon VMAXs. The list plays tons of water energies. So you can just punish small benches, or benches of small Pokemon, which kind of makes sense. You have Medicham V, Radiant Alakazam, and the Inteleon VMAXs, as well as of course, Rapid Urshifu VMAXs attack. So it's very much a bench damage-based deck. I feel like this is kind of okay. The mana feat can be taken out relatively easily with Inteleon VMAX and Medichams and Radiant Alakazams. Honestly, in one turn, that's not crazy. Also, the list runs like a wide variety of supporters, which seems a bit bold, but apparently the list is able to get away with it, so that's fine. And then, what else is there to say about it? I guess, like, to me, I don't think this deck's super strong, mostly because its typing is just kind of awful. Your main attacker is weak to Lightning, your other attacker is weak to Psychic, and those are two of the best. They're probably the two best new types from the set. So I feel like if you're just committing to attackers that are weak to that, that's not good. Especially, like, you can beat the lightning decks because you hit them for weakness with Urshifu, unless they're running Flying Pikachu, which I did not put on this list. That would go under the general Arceus category. I guess you could tech into stuff as well, but Urshifu, like, will struggle against Gardevoir EX, which is a very good deck, and then also, like, lightning stuff. I don't really love being weak to lightning. It's not awful. And the Urshifu, as I said, does cover that. But, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of this deck, but it's kind of cool. And I'll probably try it out at some point. But I played against it. It's kind of okay. Next, we're looking at a bit of a spicy deck that I wasn't sure if I was going to put on this, but a lot of people are playing it. I played it. It works pretty well, and I feel like it just deserves a spot because it's surprisingly consistent and powerful. And that's the Dialga Magnezone list, which runs a really interesting trainer and supporter and just deck build as a whole. We use Dialga V-Star's Star Chronos attack to take extra turns and Metal Blast to do big damage. And then, very importantly, you do also have the Magnezone to power your Pokemon up. It's a bit random. Looks at the top 6 cards and attaches Metal Energy there. So you see 20 Metal Energy in this list. And by the way, generally, these are just very generic lists built by, like, tons and tons of people. Probably, like, 100+ people have built, like, the same list. This deck is not. This was built by one person. You can check it out in the... I've linked to it in my Dialga video where I played this deck, and also it's on it was in a tournament in, I believe, Thailand, which this person came and did pretty well with this list. So that's why it's so popular, and it's pretty spicy. With the builds, you have, like, Miraidon EX to stretch out various basics and stuff. And it's just a pretty solid list. You could, like, make some changes if you wanted, but and I saw some people make changes to it. Notably, you could, like, drop Magnezone EX. Magnezone EX isn't amazing in this list, but that's fine. Yeah, that's all there's to say about this list, but super cool. It does struggle a bit with consistency and, like, power. It does get outclassed by some decks, I'd say, but it's still pretty good and surprisingly versatile as well. Moving on to another one of the top decks pre-rotation, which was not the best deck, but pretty solid. Mew VMAX, which is now dropped to 7th place, surprisingly. Even though it essentially lost no cards for the deck other than Quick Ball. Mew VMAX here has dropped a few places because, I don't know, it's just not really keeping up. Being a VMAX doesn't feel as good anymore. You can get one-shotted, and there's a lot of Drapion. This list has to run 3 paths. You could even run 4 to kind of Drapion. I think the Meloetta build is still very good. Also, we see people putting Arven into their lists. I don't really know why. I guess it kind of helps against Forest Seal Stone. Or get Forest Seal Stone kind of helps you with certain situations. Honestly, there's not much path to the peak in this format right now, which is pretty surprising. But actually, it's not. I'm not sure if it's that surprising. It could turn off Gardevoir. Yeah, I'd say it's surprising that there's not much path, but we see that, like, the list is pretty standard to what it was before. It's running Judge and less Elisas, but it's still the same idea where you use Mew VMAX Genesect to draw Meloetta to do big damage. And yeah, pretty straightforward stuff. I just don't... It's in a bit of an awkward spot in the meta right now, so it's not as good as it was, which I'm happy about. I think a lot of people are happy that Mew and Lugia are not on the top anymore and not as toxic, although they are still a little toxic. Next, this is a deck that I honestly didn't really know where to put on the list. It does play my boy Skwovet, a very solid card, although I think a lot of lists will start to put it in, some might cut it, that kind of thing. But it runs Skwovet but Barrel, which is also the same engine as Arceus and runs. But the idea here is to use Oinkologne EX to tank lots of damage and kind of heal. Now, I have not played this deck, and I have not played against this deck much, so I don't have a ton of idea of how, like, well the deck works, but I think it's pretty solid, and I think people have had success with it. It's definitely out of all the top 10 lists. The deck I just don't know too much about how it plays. Specifically, obviously, you want to use your 2 attacks, which are all right. They're pretty solid. I feel like the damage output on this deck's kind of low, but more importantly, you will just get, like, one-shotted sometimes, which isn't great. Then you're just going to kind of lose. I think the deck's, like, all right, but I feel like it's going to struggle against some of the, like, stronger top-tier decks. Also, this list does run Path. It's, like, a slow deck. If you liked Arceus and Inteleon, you'll like Oinkologne, the Barrel, but you know, it is what it is. It's kind of whatever. Tanky deck, and definitely worth running. I think Oinkolona's attack honestly is pretty solid as well, but it's not like anything insane either. Now moving on to a new deck. Obviously, we had some other new decks, but Miraidon Regieleki coming in the top 5 here. This deck is very solid, where you have the 4/4 Regieleki. I think is kind of necessary. You can power your Pokemon up with Electricity Generator, and the idea is you kind of attack with the Miraidons a lot. You can also attack with the Regieleki V's Hit and Run to move into Klefki. That's something I didn't originally realize before the set came out that was going to be so good, but it is very good. We also see Forest Hailstone and Sky Hailstone kind of interesting here, allowing you to either take an extra prize or set up more consistently, because you can attack with the Raikou, Drapion, or Regieleki V to take an extra prize at one point in the game. The one thing I don't love about this list is Electricity Generator is kind of inconsistent. Also, it's just like very all-in. It has no disruption other than Klefki. So it just kind of go hard, go fast with the Miraidon. You do have tanking potential with Regieleki V, but the idea is kind of just to hit lots of damage. It's a relatively straightforward deck, I guess. I guess I'm oversimplifying it, but the idea is that you get set up lots of big Pokemon, or lots of Pokemon that give up lots of prizes, meaning your opponent can kind of take advantage of your vulnerabilities. And so I feel like this deck is just a little bit vulnerable in many matchups. It's still a solid deck, though, and one of the top decks from the new set. So I'm kind of ragging on it, but it's very good. It's very good, and I'd highly recommend you play it. It's essential. It's not free on the ladder because you only get 2/2 Regieleki, but it's still a very solid deck that you should definitely pick up if you can. Now moving to the top 4. These are where I think these are the best decks, like, clearly. Giratina Lost Box is just very good. We notice that it's running a 3/3 Giratina. And not too much to say about this deck. It didn't lose too much. And now, honestly, Giratina is just such a solid Pokemon. Being able to take out the right Pokemon, and also being able to be have a lot of HP. It is a bit vulnerable to being one-shotted, but it's still very solid. And then you have the ability to punish bench Pokemon with Sableye and Radiant Greninja, which is super scary. Cramorant and Snorlax is just very solid overall attackers as well. This deck is so good, so consistent throughout the game, not too vulnerable either. We don't see too much Klefki right now, which is very good for this deck. So honestly, Giratina Lost Box is by far one of the best decks in the game. I was considering putting it higher. I'll explain why I didn't in a second, but it's still a very good deck. Moving into the third best deck, this is another new deck, the most hyped deck from the set. Certainly worth the hype. This list is a bit more techy than I imagine some people would like, but it's still very solid. The idea is you set up Gardevoir EX. It accelerates lots of energy to your Baby Gardevoir or your Zacian, and then you can just go ahead and do lots of damage that way, have a very solid prize trade as well. And you have the Curly Engine to draw lots of cards. And this displays the one other Curly and the one other Ralts. I feel like those are good inclusions, but you don't have to make those inclusions. And then it also runs like a Mew. That's very good. I originally didn't know it was that good, but it is very good. This is a deck you'll see a lot. It's a bit vulnerable if your Gardevoir gets KO'd, but you still have your strong attacker set up. And it's a very just consistent deck that I think works very well. It is a tiny bit slow, though. Generally, you won't be attacking turn 2, which is a big issue. But luckily, you can usually come back in the game with the Zacian V Sky Sealstone play, or also just with a solid tempo push with Gardevoir, Baby Gardevoir. Yeah, mostly Baby Gardevoir as your main attacker. And then you have Miriam and Clara to be able to recover Pokemon, and that seems to be working fine for this deck. And of course, it's a very versatile deck and its ability to accelerate tons of energy. So it's just definitely one of the best decks in the game right now, and the best deck from the new set. Moving into the second best deck, this is the Arceus Giratina deck. It's just very solid, and Giratina is just such a good attacker and a very general attacker. You have the Arceus V-Star to be able to tank and is a more defensive option, setup option. It's kind of early game tempo, and then you have Giratina for these big KOs. big scary threats. You can also use Star Requiem in this list if you want. You can Colas Experiment and like put some cards in the Lost Zone, and then Giratina V-Star for an instant KO, which is kind of cool, although I don't think that'll happen too often. The Star Breath is so good, but you do run Path and no bumps to Path, so Giratina V-Star power is worthwhile sometimes. I think I haven't actually ran this list too much. And then it's just like a very solid deck. We see the Barrel and no Squova, but I think that could be a nice addition. And then, honestly, the deck just very solid, very good. Nothing insane about it, but it's just a good deck that some people are saying it's the best deck in the game. I say there are two styles of decks. Ones that are like super hard hitting, and ones that are a bit more like tempo based, where they just hit solid damage, have a reasonable prize trade. Giratina is able to kind of punish them both, and honestly, it's just very good. I would like to see a a Sharon's Care in this list, be able to tank some a bit more, but overall, it's just very good. I pressed the wrong button. Moving to the best deck in the game, and this is why I didn't have Giratina Lost Box as number 3, because having Giratina Lost Box and then Giratina and then Lost Box seemed a bit off, and Gardevoir is seeing more play, and I feel like I just decided to put it higher. And it's better, I guess. It's very close, but Lost Box here at number 1. It's just very good, right? You can go ahead and the difference between this and the Giratina list is obviously you don't play Giratina. Instead, you play various other Pokemon. You can run more Sableyes. This list only runs one Cramorant. That's just kind of interesting. I feel like if it's prize, it's just kind of bad, but whatever. You can attack with Radiant Ninja, Sableye to apply a lot of pressure to your opponent's bench, which they can't do too much about. And then you have very powerful attackers in Snorlax, Zamazenta. The Cramorant is very solid. Raikou V is like a counter option and just a V Pokemon, and Drapion V. And then in most games, you can use Sky Seal Stone as well to finish off the game with Raikou or Drapion, or you could put in Galarian Zapdos V. That also sees a bunch of play. The list is able to make good use of cards like Energy Recycler, Beach Court, some like new staple cards. The one thing it doesn't like is it loses a Rod, but you can replace that with Claire without too much issue, and it plays a Raihan. Goes Experiment Boss. Honestly, the deck is just insane right now. Super annoying to deal with as well to counter. It's just so hard. You just need to run these very generic safe decks to beat Lost Zone, which is kind of annoying, but, you know, Lost Zone's just so good. So if you're wondering what deck to play Lost Zone or Giratina Arceus. I think either of those are just amazingly good. Or honestly, any of the decks, any of like the top 4 here, I'd say are certainly fine. Really anything in the top 10 is fine. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts. There are so many cool decks, and these are not necessarily my favorite decks, or the decks I think will have the most power as people develop the meta a bit more, because generally people start safe, and then they end safe too, and they are safe in the middle. Pokemon players just tend to play very safe decks, unfortunately. So I might have to innovate some decks here. I don't know. I'm not a competitive player by any means, but I hope you enjoyed. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the best deck, so feel free to comment that down below. And if you enjoyed, I'd really appreciate it if you liked the video, if you subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to hit, I don't know, I haven't set specific goals. I'd like to hit 300 by the end of the month, I'll say. But I hope you enjoyed. As always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.